Okay, so today I want to say some more things about the Wharfedale Super Linton that you can still see behind me. And those more things are largely, but not entirely, a result of comments landing underneath our review video, which has been viewed, I think, almost 50,000 times in less than a week, and that's pretty impressive. So thank you to everyone who has watched it so far. And if you haven't watched that video, then I suggest you do so before proceeding with this video. Okay, so 5 more thoughts on the Wharfedale Super Linton.
This episode is brought to you by Marantz, makers of the ISA award-winning Model M1 streaming amplifier. Click the link below for more info.
So number 1, you don't have to listen to the Linton and the Super Linton side by side for long to realise that the Linton, I don't think, wasn't designed to sound neutral. It's coloured, it has a personality, and my best guess is that Peter Como tuned it to sound like a vintage speaker that predated the digital audio age. And the way I hear it, Como also made the bass sound thicker on the Linton than the Super Linton. And that might be one reason why it isn't as revealing of source components and source material as the Super Linton, which I think better exposes those upstream differences. And another reason might be that the Super Linton has a cleaner sounding treble than the Linton. So all this to say that the Super Linton is less coloured and has less of a personality of its own than the Linton. Now, some listeners won't like that, but others will, especially those who like to roll their amplifiers frequently, which brings us to number 2. I recently spent a month with the Linton in Portugal, and I mostly used the NAD M23 and M66 pre-power combo. But cutting over to the Hagel H590, rounded transients just a smidge. Not that the Linton really needs that, but those amplifiers' I can't say it. But those amplifiers' audible differences can be heard as more pronounced through the more affordable KEF Q Concerto Meta than through the Linton. And I think that's pretty interesting. Okay, so what about the Super Linton here in Germany? So we know that Wharfedale rates the Super Linton at 90 dB sensitive. So that's more sensitive than your average stand mount. So for example, the KEF Q Concerto Meta is rated by KEF at, I think, 85 dB sensitive. And we also know that Wharfedale rates the Super Linton's nominal impedance at 6 ohms. And the KEF, by contrast, sit at 4 ohms. So on paper, the musical fidelity A1 and its 25 watts per channel should be a better match for the Super Linton than the KEF. But my listening experiences say otherwise. So for me, the musical fidelity A1 sounds a bit too lackluster and lifeless, yeah, for my tastes with the Super Linton, especially in the top end. And this is why I cut over to the Audiolab 9000A after a day with the A1. And yet, with the Q Concerto Meta, I have a pair here, they're right over here. With those, I prefer the A1 over the Audiolab. Now, I'm not sure what the technical reasons are for this. I'm sure they exist, but it's just another example of how we need to listen for ourselves before spending any money. Number 3, I do like the A1 with the Zoo DWX, which unlike the KEF, sells for similar money to the Super Linton. But with our Super Linton purchase, we get matching stands that can house a small selection of records. Now, just a reminder at this point, the plural of vinyl is vinyl and not vinyls. Now, getting matching stands for the Zoo could be a bit of a pain. After all, Zoo doesn't make them or sell them, and my DWX stands were custom made for me by a very generous patron. Now, I've already told you that the Super Linton aren't as dynamic sounding as the Zoo. So if you're after the most exciting listen, where the speaker sort of shoves sound into the room, you want the Zoo. And the Wharfedale aren't as mid-range focused as the Zoo, but they aren't a laid-back speaker either. So we might say that the Super Linton is more evenly tonally balanced than the Zoo. And that brings us to number 4. I'm often on the fence about the Zoo DWX needing a subwoofer. So with some material like Bright Eyes' indie rollicking cartoon blues, I think yes, they do. But with Robert Liner's analog days, and that's electronic music, I think no, they don't. So that double think rarely materializes when I listen to music through the Super Linton. And I think this is one of the Super Linton's greatest strengths. So it won't go all the way down to 20 Hertz. In fact, I think it rolls off somewhere in the mid-30s, but that mid-30s roll-off is great for me because this room's most troublesome mode sits at around 33 Hertz. So I've said it before and I'll say it again, the room will impact the sound of your speakers more than your amplifier or DAC. And lastly, number 5. As I said in my main Super Linton video, I think this is a terrific loudspeaker, especially for listeners with smaller rooms who, like me, often find smaller two-way stand mounts tend to demand the presence or the assistance of a subwoofer. And this in turn can limit our amplifier choices if we want one with proper bass management. Now, one commenter said that he thinks the Super Linton competes with speakers selling for 2 or 3 times the price. Now, I admire this commenter's enthusiasm, and I'm not saying he's wrong. But in failing to specify those more expensive rivals, he hides his claim behind a generalization. So effectively, his claim talks loud, but says nothing. Anyway, if you like this video, you know what to do, and join us on Patreon for playlists and behind the scenes footage. And thank you ever so much for watching. Oh yeah, I almost forgot my recommended album for this video. This week I have been hammering this album. Actually, it's Echo and the Bunnymen's What Are You Going to Do With Your Life? This came out, I think, in '99 originally. So this is a 25th anniversary edition. It's a 2 CD remaster. The original master I don't think was all that good. I think it was a bit loud. This one sort of adds a little bit of extra separation. I've got the original CD over there, I think. But it also adds a whole bunch of bonus tracks, which I think, well, I can't believe they weren't on the original album. And then there are some alternative mixes, a piano and guitar version of History Chimes, and then some radio edits on disc 2 and a whole bunch of, yeah, a bunch of live versions. So for like 20 bucks, I think this cost me. That's a pretty good deal. It's certainly better than the 30 bucks you'd spend on the vinyl, which doesn't have any of the bonus tracks. So I know a lot of the Echo and the Bunnymen conversation tends to center around their earlier 80s output, but I'm a big fan of their 90s records, especially Evergreen, which I think is slightly better than this one. But this, yeah, is a close second. So again, it's called What Are You Going to Do With Your Life? It's indie pop. This is more lush than Evergreen. There are more strings. It's more stripped back. So not every Bunnymen fan is going to like this, but I do.